When we think of MMO games, most of us might imagine wide-open fantasy landscapes, expansive regions and cities built for exploration, questing, and collaboration. In the late 90s and early 2000s, most major MMOs followed this formula, capitalizing on the growing graphical power of computers and the networking power of the internet to build larger, more intricate worlds that could be experienced by hundreds or even thousands of players at the same time. Lord of the Rings Online, first released back in 2007, was another entry in this golden era of MMOs, marketed as an immersive, narrative journey through Tolkien's world. It could never hope to dethrone WoW, of course, but even today, like back then, it has a certain niche appeal to players who prefer lore and questing over other aspects of the game. The vanilla launch of LotRO included much of the region of Eriador, including the Shire, Bree, and Rivendell, most of which existed on a singular interconnected map, no loading screens required. Some of the earliest videos on my channel even highlighted this cohesive Middle-earth as I roamed through the various zones. After a successful launch, the team at Turbine Games planned on tackling the next chapter of this great adventure, the Mines of Moria, one of the most grandiose and famous locations in all of Tolkien's works. There was a problem though. Moria was much more complex than anything the team had approached before, and they had to get creative in how they implemented this new, highly anticipated expansion. Today, I want to examine the genius strategies implemented by Turbine to create the illusion of the perfect 3D Moria in Lord of the Rings Online. As always, thank you for the fun comments and support, and with all that being said, let's get right into it. I think this topic is best discussed in 3 sections: geography, atmosphere, and story. Let's go back to what we were talking about with interconnected maps first. Like many MMOs of the time, and still today, LotRO utilizes a tile-based approach to world mapping, with the engine loading chunks of what is essentially a 2D sheet of terrain to act as the base plate of the game world. This base plate can then be sculpted and modified to create mountains and valleys and everything in between. Then, other 3D models can be added on top, like trees or ruins or objects, along with color and textures to make the world feel more complete. Interiors, like caves and houses, were handled as separate maps, with loading screen portals at the entrances. This is how Eriador was built, but for the devs working on the next big piece of the game, it may have been a bit doubtful that this system could work for the Mines of Moria. While the outdoor world works well as a continuous layer of land, how would this work inside the mines? Cramped corridors, bridges, pits, and caverns all needed to be modeled. But most concerning of all, the layers of this massive area. Moria in the lore is inherently a 3D area, with large areas of the Misty Mountains being hollowed out to create the dwarven buildings and mines of old. It had to have a sense of scale and immersion, same as the vanilla world, but also a sense of verticality, with pieces of the kingdom being built right above or right below each other. But how could that be shown in game? The engine was designed, to my knowledge, with a flat, landscape-esque function in mind. It could be problematic to try and work with multiple base plates on top of one another and contend with the ensuing technical issues. This is a similar sort of issue that Blizzard dealt with when developing Wrath of the Lich King around the same time, with the underground Azul Nerub being too technically complex to render underneath Northrend. So, if not a cohesive multi-story map, why not split Moria into multiple maps, each corresponding to a zone or two at a particular Y level? Loading screens could connect the various levels at natural entry points, but that might break the immersion, segment the experience into a tedious series of maps that players would constantly have to load in and out. While this method was used for a couple fringe cases, which I'll get to later, what the team came up with for Moria proper was much more creative, and it ended up squeezing every last bit of capability out of LotRO's world software. The majority of the Mines of Moria is actually a single connected map, same as the outdoor Eriador region from before, but with much more dramatic topographical features. Deep chasms appear, plunging into the darkness below, and impassable walls of rock act as the borders between various zones. However, this approach doesn't inherently address the point I mentioned earlier, layers on top of layers. Sure, the various zones do have some difference in elevation, with ramps, tunnels, stairways, and bridges, well, bridging the gaps, but there is nothing actually underneath any of these zones, just a void. So how did Turbine approach this? Here's the map of Moria we see in-game. You can read the map in the typical north, east, south, and west fashion like any other map, but there's also an implied layer of depth that takes place here. Physically, you could say the zone of Durin's Way is to the north of the Great Delving or Zelem Melek, but it's more accurate to imagine Durin's Way as mostly above these other zones. The north-south axis is an approximate indicator of up and down in this game world, even if the physical space your character explores isn't actually a series of stacked layers. The only exceptions to this are the Walls of Moria and the Pinnacle of Zirak Zigil, both of which have loading screens to their own separate maps, but overall, this system is absolutely a unique solution to the limited technology of LotRO's engine. The devs even included consistent bits of geography along this up-down axis to further reinforce this illusion. For instance, here in Nud Malek, you can find the broken bridge of Khazad Dûm the Fellowship ran across on their journey, and the site of Gandalf's Fall. Down in the Foundations of Stone, far to the south on the map, you can find the bridge shard that fell down from above. I'm sure there are other small connections like this referenced on the map as well, but the other one I'd like to highlight is the Endless Stair, the corkscrew staircase that rises from the lowest levels and goes all the way to the highest peaks of Moria. Gandalf fought the Balrog up these stairs, all the way to the top, and we can actually see the pillar in 4 separate zones: the Foundations of Stone, Nud Malek, Durin's Way, and the peak of Zirak Zigil. Notice how these spots are all geographically separated, but are implied to literally be on top of one another. It's a great bit of detail that just goes to show the devs really wanted to convey the vertical scope of Moria, even though they couldn't actually present it that way. The physical geography isn't the only way Moria conveys the placement of its zones, and the atmosphere and ambiance also contributes to how we understand this dark realm. Up in Durin's Way, things are much brighter, with the grand mirror networks of Moria bringing in light from the surface, and the breathtaking garden of Thorak Bazan is quite the sight to witness underground. We are obviously much closer to the surface here. The central levels, like the Great Delving, Zelem Melek, and the Redhorn Lodes, are more of the typical dwarven tunnels, chambers, and mining sites, but the southern, or should I say lower, levels are really where the darkness becomes oppressive. The dismal waterworks, the forgotten flaming deeps, and of course the rotten foundations of stone make you feel like you've reached the ends of the earth, just in a different direction. The story, especially the epic quest line, plays into this idea of depth, with characters often referencing above or below when discussing geography or strategy in the war against the orcs. I think one of my favorites has to be from Volume 2, Book 4, in which the dwarves are concerned that this well in Durin's Way might be a way for the orcs to climb up and invade them from the waterworks below. And the best part? They even coded it so that if you're brave enough to jump down the well, you zone into the waterworks, something I didn't discover until yesterday. It's not the softest landing though. With so much emphasis placed on dealing with the threats of Moria, mostly from below and in the deeper levels, it's confirmed time and time again that the zones here aren't really north or south as much as they are above or below one another, making for a cohesive gaming experience with a unique twist. Maybe not perfect in terms of representing Moria in a 3D space, but convincing enough to captivate thousands and present it with style. And I just find it fascinating to explore what the team at Turbine was able to accomplish within the constraints of the game engine. I think they picked a great approach, and even if you don't play LotRO, it deserves to be remembered as a major milestone in its history. Thank you all so much for watching. I've wanted to make this video for over 3 years now, and I'm really glad I finally got around to making it. Whether you're someone who's never tried LotRO before, or it's your main game, I hope you learned something new. And maybe next time you're delving into the mines for one reason or another, you'll view them in a new way. A special thank you to my channel members who provide bonus support for these videos, and until next time, may the Force be with you.